Defense is blackjack. Your job is to deal out 16s.
Right.
I
read that in your book. Yep.
Yeah. If you're the house, you're never going broke.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, William Liu. I'm joined by TrueHoop's David Thorpe, and this is the Hello and Welcome podcast presented by Betway. Make sure you find Hello and Welcome wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe. Please rate and review the show. Thanks to your support in week one, we have already returned to the top spot in basketball podcasts in Canada, and I want us to keep it that way, and you do so by continuing to leave reviews on our show. Also, please commenting, like, and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. The more engagements our videos get, the more YouTube knows to push our content so that more Raptor fans can join the community. So, in addition to that, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Hello and Welcome Pod. This is a very long intro, but we are bringing in an old friend of the program. David has joined us on Raptors Over Everything. He has joined us on the Raptors show, and now that we are in the Hello and Welcome era, David Thorpe of TrueHoop joins us once again. David, you're so generous with your time. And we welcome you to talk about the NBA Finals.
I'm happy to talk about the final series of the playoffs. And then, unfortunately, there's no break. We got the draft and summer league, and we got a couple weeks, and it's back again. But yeah, it should be an amazing series.
It should be an amazing series. I think Boston, everyone knew that they were going to come out of the East. I do think that, they face some pretty different teams. Like, obviously, Indiana and Cleveland are very, very different. The Miami team that they faced in round one is also quite different. But Boston, I think, has obviously shown what they can do. And then I think Dallas, probably the West is more, I think, closely matched. I think that there were teams that gave Dallas some issues. OKC in particular, I thought pushed them really hard. We've arrived with those two teams in the finals. I want to start with defensively. How can Dallas guard the Celtics? Because the Celtics were the number one offense in league history, and also number one offense this year as well. How can Dallas, who has improved a lot on defense, contain the Boston Celtics?
I mean, it's not going to be easy at all. In talking to a lot of people these last few days, NBA players, coaches, college coaches follow the game closely. I ask everyone the same question. What side of the court is Boston better, offense or defense? And 100% say defense. And I have to tell them they're wrong. That Boston's defense was second best in the league, best in the East, but their offense is the best of all time. It's just so easy to forget. And I also, I'm not going to let you say this. That's why I'm going to say it first. And if it turns out I'm wrong, I'm happy to come on your show and admit that I'm stupid. But there's a lot of people out there suggesting that Dallas has a big advantage in the sense that what the road they went through is tougher than Boston's. And while there is some truth to that in some cases, I spoke to a Celtics player and a Celtics coach after the series was over, before and after. Indiana was no joke. And thanks to Canada's Andrew Nembhard, even when they're missing Halliburton, they had a Halliburton in there anyway. In fact, he was a better driver than Tyrese normally is. Indiana's speed offensively is something Dallas can't touch. Dallas has Luka and Kyrie. It's a totally different thing. And it's not just speed. I watched Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson. I told you off air that my wife's headed out of the country. My daughter's busy. She's in town, but she's visiting. I'm alone at night with my dog. And I ended up watching Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart on YouTube before I watched a documentary on the Cold War. And they were talking about how demoralizing it was. Not their words, but the way they would score, and all of a sudden Obi Toppin or Pascal Siakam are laying up or dunking at the rim.
Right.
But it's not just the full court speed. It's also the half court decision-making processing power of Rick Carlisle's blur ball offense. So I'm bringing this up for a reason. I think Boston, while not facing a stiff defense in Indiana, although that was probably benefiting from Halliburton being out, that's the one area of the court that they're better without Tyrese. They're certainly up to speed with intensity and physicalness. Indiana had 3 of those 4 games, 90+% chance to win with the last few minutes of the game, as you know.
Yep.
So they're going to be ready. Now, I think it was Boston's offense, not their defense, that won that last series. I think they wore Indiana down mentally because of their offense. You have to guard everybody. I heard Harden and Brunson kind of making fun of Tyrese for you guys couldn't win one game. Well, number one, they started Ben Shepherd in 2 of those games. So nothing against Ben Shepherd, but it's 4-on-5 when you're playing a rookie from Belmont. It's not like this guy was, a candidate for NBA Rookie of the Year kind of thing. And most of those guys can't help much. But Al Horford made 7 of 12 threes. Jaylen Brown made a corner 3 in the blink of an eye. They have lots of weapons. And while they can get a little bit, people can criticize their offense. They're the best of all time. So what are we doing? What are we really doing? Are we going to criticize Jason Tatum for not being the best player in the world when he's among the best players in the world? No, I'm not going to do that. So the hardest thing for Dallas is going to be there's no Rudy Gobert, there's no McDaniels, there's no Alexander Walkers, there's no Cat who's going to miss a ton of shots, and therefore you don't have to guard him because they've got weapons, especially with Porzingis if he comes back. He is a legitimate 3-point threat with size and a quick release. And they can bully you with their guards. Kyrie's going to really have to defend because both true. I thought going into the Indiana series, Holiday versus Halliburton was a real problem for the Pacers. And I wasn't wrong when he had, I think, at 20-something the first game. Derek White can score when he wants to. Jaylen Brown has reached – he's at the pinnacle of his powers right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's awesome.
He's unbelievable. He bullies you. He's got skill. His handle's gotten better. There's a pace that they play with that's scary because everyone is a threat all the time. So Dallas is going to have to make some decisions, and then they're going to have to adjust. And I think this is where the real problem lies in the series is I think Boston has a better idea of what they have to do and what their counters are when Luka and or Kyrie go nuclear, which is no easy thing. Boston presents more complex problems because they have so many more guys that can really do damage and be the fulcrum of the offense. And so I think Dallas you have to navigate screens well, and you've got to talk through screens and how you're doing it. If they want to drop, that's fine. If they want to switch, okay. But you're still going to have mismatches in both situations. You're going to have Jrue Holiday and Derek White going downhill. And if you want to solve the pick and roll, which is 2 players, the guy guarding the ball and then the defensive big at the rim, those guards can really hurt you. They also have quick release artists in Tatum and Brown. You really got to get back in transition because they will run. And I think the Pacers series reminded them, we can do this. They can find another level of speed. In fact, it's possible Rick Carlisle kind of messed up by picking up full court when he did. And I know what he was doing. He was trying to wear them down, but it slowed Boston down a little bit. Boston was seduced into running fast the way New York was seduced into playing fast, right into Rick Carlisle's hands. And the picking up full court slowed them down a little bit, made them a little more deliberate, but they can reach that speed gear as they did in much of the series against Indiana. And I think that can be problematic for Dallas. So they're going to have to just kind of make some decisions on are we not doubling? Are we trying to just hope these guys don't get hot and score over us? Tatum can do that. Brown can do that. They have to not foul. That's a real problem in the series. If I looked at the macro view of the Pacers series, the amount of time, I didn't look this up, but I watched the games. The amount of time the Pacers were in the bonus was minuscule compared to the amount of time the Celtics were in the bonus. That's a big factor. You get free points all the time that way. So Dallas also has to not foul.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. It's interesting because Dallas, I would say, has the two of the most accomplished, difficult shot makers, right? And when you're talking about who you would want taking a difficult shot, Luka and Kyrie come up at the top of your list.
Yeah.
But I think the thing with Boston is they excel at creating easier shots, partially because they have basically 5 all-star or all-star caliber players in the starting lineup, especially when Porzingis is healthy.
Correct.
They create easier offense. And I think that's where it doesn't necessarily look as impressive as, let's say, Luka, dancing with Gobert and then stepping back for the game winner. But at the same time, they've created so many easy shots over the course of a game that it's hard to even be in a game, which is why it is kind of impressive that Indiana, despite their injuries, were able to take the lead in certain games. But, at the same time, Indiana. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Indiana is a similar team, right? They create a lot of easy shots, and that's what sort of gets them really going as well. But I think for maybe even just in the bigger view, aside from the fact that they have a lot of talent, what is it in particular with the Celtics where they're so good offensively? Like, why?
I think
in
it's
addition
IQ.
to the talent.
I think it's skill and IQ. If you want to call skill as part of the talent category, there were many possessions, if not most possessions, where I thought, oh, they just made every single guy made the right decision, and that's if you want to break down the series with boxes checked over who has an advantage where and have like 60 different categories, the Celtics would win overwhelmingly. They do so many more things better than Dallas does. Dallas just has Luka. And Kyrie, is no slouch, obviously. Luka's the bigger difference maker. And that counts for probably 10 boxes checked right there. That's
sure.
Yeah, you don't apologize for having that guy on your team, especially the way he played. But Boston's IQ, their spacing. One of the really important things, again, getting more into the weeds, is if you look at how Minnesota responded in Game 5 to Luka's nuclear 4 minutes and the first quarter in general. I happened to watch that live. I don't know if you did. They melted down.
Yep.
The game was over. It should not have been over. Mm-hmm. Indiana put on some dazzling and dizzying displays of scoring, not just in Game 7 against the Knicks where they broke some kind of record for Game 7, but in the Celtics series. You would never, ever think the Celtics had the number 1 rated defense in the East with the way Indiana was scoring in parts of that game. The emotional maturity of Boston was really impressive. They just stayed with it. They were down 18 in one of those games. They were down in the fourth quarter of 3 of those games, late in those games, obviously going down to the final seconds of Game 1. And they just didn't melt down. That doesn't mean if you miss a shot, you're melting. They missed shots too, but they just stayed with it. I was really impressed with that. That diligent, perseverant, kind of a chippy attitude. And boy, that's really going to help when Luka goes nuclear, which won't be easy because of who they have to guard him. Mm-hmm. It won't be easy to guard that guy, but he is an amazing, tough shot maker. And quite frankly, if we see many minutes of what we just saw in Game 5 from Luka in that first quarter, I mean, that's the recipe for Dallas to win. It's just not the most bankable strategy. Our best player is going to make crazy shots and also crazy passes because we can't forget that problem-solving aspect of his game, like Jokic. But Jokic is the great passer, but also wasn't getting as tough as shots last year as what we just saw Luka do against Minnesota. I think he's going to have to do something similarly that he just did. But at the same time, I think Dallas's challenge defensively is significantly tougher than what they just faced in actually in the last couple of series, to be honest with you. I think this is a far, far, far better team than Oklahoma City and Minnesota. In fact, I think Indiana had a chance to beat both those teams in the playoffs too.
I think, it's interesting because I've been impressed with sort of Luka's commitment on the defensive end. I mean, it's more
he's trying hard.
He's trying hard. It's more than zero. He's pulling the chair on guys in the post. He's doing a good job of just trying to do what he can. Kyrie to a lesser extent as well. But I do think that in those previous matchups, in the way that those teams played offense, there were more spaces and more like opportunities for Luka and Kyrie, I guess, to rest and hide her, on a weaker guy. It's hard to do that against Boston. So
you can't do it against Boston. You can't do it against Boston unless you don't mind Horford taking shots, and maybe that'll be fine. Right? He went 7 of 12 in one game. They only needed one game from him. He didn't have to do that in every game because of all the weapons they have. But also Al Horford and Jrue Holiday and Derek White got huge offensive rebounds in games 1, 2, and 4. Because I'm sorry, game 1, 3, and 4. Game 2 was I call it a blowout. Rick decided to rest his guys late in the third quarter. It was a little weird. The game was never really, a blowout.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, game 1, 3, and 4, those guys got huge offensive rebounds. So again, you just can't take a playoff against them. And I thought that I've never seen the Pacers tired, really not much all season. I thought they got tired in these games because, Tyrese being out, man, everyone had to play a little bit more. The stress of guarding Boston was really a big deal. and Dallas is going to be faced with that right away.
Yeah. Okay, on the flip side, I think for Boston, the decision when you go up against Dallas, how are you going to guard Luka first and foremost? Are you going to live with switches? Are you going to try to keep it sort of a 2-on-2 game in the pick and roll? Are you going to try to blitz him? I think a lot of that depends. Well, fair enough, but I think a lot of that depends on the health of some of the players. You know, is Kristaps going to be available? How much is he going to be available? What's the physical state? Because obviously he's going to look to attack a lot of their bigs, but yeah, I mean, if you were Joe Mazzulla right now and you got basically a week to prepare for how you're going to scheme against Luka, what are like the top 2 or 3 things you should be doing against him?
So as someone who helps players deal with that do it all the time, I got a few answers. But first of all, the biggest benefit of this break, the Super Bowl, I had one coach tell me from one of the teams, it's like being the Super Bowl. You really have some time.
Yeah.
So the obvious benefit is everyone gets to rest, and which is great for the fans. We're going to see maybe a faster, better played finals than we often see when these guys are exhausted. But the other benefit, the secret benefit, is Porzingis has a chance to practice. So I don't know that they'll be going hard first team versus second team, but I know that they're two-way players and end of the bench players, and maybe some of the younger coaches who can still get up and down and think the game. They're not going to be able to simulate Dallas. Well, their two-way players are fantastic. The Celtics G League team did make it to the finals of the G League championships, and those two-way guys are really, really good. They have a 6'9" two-way player named Drew Peterson, who is not Luka, but he's a starting level player in the NBA. Trust me on that. He's 24. He's phenomenal. He's Duncan Robinson as a point guard. Can really shoot, can really pass, plays defense. Okay. He's 6'9". So I promise I haven't asked anyone there because I have close relationships with people on both teams. So I don't want to be the intermediary of anything. Fair. But I am certain he's Luka this week, and he's very good. But he ain't Luka, obviously. He's going to be a starter one day. Remember, and I told you that. So KP gets a chance to go against those guys, and he won't be as rusty because of it. I don't know that he's back in game 1. I only assume that he is because he was close to getting back. People thought he'd get back in this series by maybe game 5. So I think he'll be back. He won't be as rusty as he was before. So regarding Luka, so I think a lot of times the media makes all media members make the mistake of trying to lock in on one thing. But if you watch these games, there's constant changes and not necessarily strategic changes delivered by the bench. But there are times where players just decide to solve it themselves, whether they prepare before the possession and they talk about it a timeout, or they just do it on the fly because they're reading off each other. So as soon as I sense, this guy's switching, he's calling out switch, I'll switch it. He's not calling out switch, so maybe we're blitzing it. Then we'll do a late switch, or we'll next it with the next guy coming up to rotate. And that's not even part of the built-in strategy. It's just something that they do. That's how the game really is played. Now, once you find something that, hey, this is kind of like penicillin. Oh, man, this thing kills infections. Now we got something until it doesn't, and then you shift to something else. But the first rule of thumb when you go against Luka, what would you guess it is? Because for me, it's always the same thing.
The first rule of thumb when you're guarding Luka.
It's really easy, Will. Once I tell you, you'll never forget it ever for guarding a player like Luka.
I don't know. Don't let him get to the rim. Like, what do you want? Like, don't let him touch the paint? Can't foul him. Okay, that makes sense, yeah. You
cannot give these guys free throws. Now, the good news is Boston's elite at that. I question some of the no calls. Again, the Pacers were almost never in the bonus.
Yeah, never.
But Boston is famous for they don't foul. That goes to experience and IQ and all of that. And so keeping Luka off the line is not going to be easy. But if you had to devise a backcourt in your lab, who are the two guys you would pick that can really guard and not foul? It would be Derek White and Jrue Holiday.
Right.
And so I don't think they're necessarily going to be the only guys guarding him. That's for sure. I think Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are going to have their moments. I think they'll switch some. Horford will be more of a problem than I think KP. Not that KP can stay with them, but that length will factor to some degree. I think they're also going to try to help off him deliberately, maybe off PJ. Remember, Boston, I think they finished top 2 or 3 in the league in preventing corner threes. And Dallas takes a lot of them. So they're not going to necessarily leave a player. Like, let's not let's not worry about helping out PJ or not worry about helping out Derek Jones Jr. It'll be more where they are on the court. So if you're not guarding a guy in the corner, you're more likely then to squeeze in, for example, when KP is on him. Cheat in more. This is where Luka's passing talent is so incredibly valuable, is he can find you before he dribbles or after he dribbles, and every time, kind of the end of his dribble attack, before he dribble attacks, and then anytime during that dribble attack, he's amazing at finding people and cutters. But he's going to be challenged because Boston is really special at taking away what you most are, what you like to do most, find that corner shooter. They just don't let you do it, typically anyway, And so, but you can't foul him. Yeah, you want to find him early, and you keep. Obviously, everyone always wants to keep you from taking easy shots. Don't let him get on the offensive glass. Don't let him kind of scramble around and get an easy layup here and there. The goal is to be aware, hyper aware always of where he is and what he's doing, and deny him some, make him work out on the court more. I thought he got healthier I thought he looked worse early in the series against Minnesota in terms of movement. I thought in Game 5 his movement was great, but we have to remember this. Boston has been here a lot. Not all these players, but most of them. Not only the finals once before, except for Holiday. Yeah, no, Holiday's been there once before too. But just the playoffs in general, they're so experienced. This is really new for all the Mavericks players, but Kyrie and a little bit of Luka, who played in the finals a couple years ago, and conference finals and in Europe. And so I could see Boston, thinking, well, we're going to make PJ and Derek beat us not from the corner. We're going to make Kleber beat us from whatever is not his best spot, which I do think getting him back matters. But the biggest thing is you take away the free throws and the easy shots, and if he can beat you over the top all the time, as I always tell players, you got to make him take the toughest shot possible. If he keeps making them, well, then the coach has to change his strategy, not you, in most cases. So then that's when Missoula has to change up strategies and blitz them more and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, this is a big conversation that took place on TNT because obviously they had the Western Conference Finals, and we could be honest about it. Like there was a strong agenda against Rudy Gobert in the finals. I
did not listen to any of that.
Okay,
garbage.
Well, unfortunately, they had Draymond on the broadcast, so as you can imagine, there would be a lot of that. But there was also a lot of discussion, I think, tactically around. I think Stan Van Gundy was really pushing the idea of, well, I don't know if Minnesota can stay in drop all the time against Luka with Gobert. And I think one of the things they kept pointing out was Gobert kept having to be caught in a 2-on-1 thing against Luka in the paint, and that's how Luka got a lot of those lobs to their centers. And they've obviously added Gafford and Lively, and those two guys are premium lob catchers. What can Dallas do against that? Because the reason I said don't let Luka get into the paint is just it does feel like he's gonna kill you either way. Obviously, he's super big and he's got great finishes, but he also has that impeccable touch on the lob passes that you're always worried about one of their centers jumping in from behind, or even Derek Jones Jr. Like he'll be behind the 3-point line and Luka will throw a lob and it'll be perfect. So
he's the best lob passer in the league. Yeah, he's the best lob passer in the league. So I wrote about that when they traded for Gafford. Is that okay? Now they have 48 minutes of lob catchers with the best lob passer in the league. So what I missed when I wrote an article about them in January or February was I thought their defense would be better. I didn't think it'd be elite. I didn't even go there. But they also, Derek Jones Jr. wasn't as much a factor as he is now.
Right.
Timmy Hardaway was playing more back then. So I didn't see it. But offensively, I thought it's going to be a real problem. In fact, I thought they'd be contenders after they traded for those two guys. And so, I don't think drop is a good answer for them. He's too talented in drop. But the Pacers also murdered drop coverage. And so Boston wasn't able to do a ton of that either. Right. And so they're just more comfortable playing other ways. They'll solve it other problems. They'll go under some. I think without question they will try to meet him on the way to the rim. Okay. Turning Luka into a 3-point shooter, heavily contested, isn't necessarily a bad strategy until it is. So again, you're looking, if they can get him to be cold for 7-8 minutes and all of a sudden he gets hot for 2 or 3, probably a win. And then you adjust from there. So, but I don't love drop. As long as Lively is able to play, that's 48 minutes. Those guys are going to have their own problems, though. Like there are scenarios where Dallas has trouble playing their fives because they're going to have to live. They're going to have to be on the 3-point line with both KP and Horford, That was not the case, except when Cat was the 5.
Right.
When Naz Reid too.
Rare.
Right. Naz Reid for sure is a very good shooter too. But he's easier to close out than KP is.
Mm-hmm.
And Horford also was a quick release. He gets it off quick. So, I don't love drop in general against Luka.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other obviously matchup, we haven't mentioned his name yet. Kyrie Irving. I think I'm watching Kyrie, and I think every time he scores, there's like an emotional component to it, as because you're making him take usually the toughest shots. Like he has every shot in the book somehow. Like he'll drive right and then somehow finish back with his left mid-air hanging on the way down, stuff like that over a contest. He'll get a lot of and ones. He'll just pull up in your face as in transition for threes, even though you're a bigger defender, you might think you can close out to him. I think there's like that aspect, but I also think that Kyrie has been like, especially times in that OKC series, like a little up and down. Like not always, but there's some times where he's a little bit up and down. Ultimately, Boston has one of the best options, I would say, to potentially match up against Kyrie in Jrue Holiday. Number one, do you think Jrue Holiday is going to be the main defender against Kyrie? Because obviously they can also use him against Luka as well. And just in general, how do you approach guarding Kyrie Irving?
Okay, so a few things. Kyrie, I think, starts games too often slowly by design.
That's their whole pattern, right? Luka starts the game off, really carries it, then Kyrie comes on strong in the second half, usually in the fourth quarter.
I don't love that against Boston. I didn't love it in this series. In fact, I was talking to a Mavericks player during the series about that I thought Kyrie needed to apply himself more early because the games are tight. And it's a common thing a lot of superstars do. I've criticized LeBron for that. The year they won the championship, I thought he was playing with fire a little bit too much. Turns out he won the championship, but they lost some games when he just didn't inject himself early enough because it's a cumulative game. The first quarter matters too. Kyrie is the best finishing guard I've ever seen, but that doesn't mean he's always a great finishing guard. And have I ever told you my philosophy of defense, how I teach defense as a strategy? You know about this?
No, I don't
You ever
think so.
play blackjack?
Yeah, of course.
So I've written about this. Defense is blackjack. Your job is to deal out 16s.
Right.
I
read that in your book. Yep.
Yeah. If you're the house, you're never going broke. If you have a dealer that's gifted enough to keep dealing out 16s or you cheat, you're going to do really well. That doesn't mean some people are going to get 21 and 20, and beat you, whatever. On occasion, when they hit on 16 all the time. Kyrie is one of those guys. It's really hard to deal a 16 to him. And Luka too. This is what the greats can do. Is they just like KD. Everything's an 11 to KD. Double down everything. He has every shot in the game. Luka pretty much is that way too now.
Yeah.
Kyrie not quite as much, but very close. So this is why I go back to Boston's emotional maturity. I thought 2 years ago, Jason Tatum ran out of gas. They were up 2-1, game 4 at home against Golden State. And from that point on, I think at some point late in the game, the rest of the series, Tatum was just awful. He had played in the Olympics the summer prior. I thought he had nothing left, zero juice. The way Stan Van Gundy made fun of all of us who thought the Knicks were running out of gas when they had that great game 5. Hey, Stan, they fucking sucked after that. Okay?
Yeah, they did.
So they had nothing left. And I listened to Hart talk. He almost can't remember being as tired. And Brunson, too. They have moments where they remember being so tired, but they were exhausted. And when you're out of gas, you're out of gas. So I think that this Celtics team doesn't look like they're going to be close to being out of gas. And so now when you're facing Kyrie and you're fresh all the time, you of course have to stay in front of him. Size can be a factor, and they've got big guards and big wings who can move. One of the benefits of being an offensive-minded big wing, like Tatum especially, but Brown is not small, is I think it gives you some better abilities to defend the perimeter. For example, I have a talented center, very good player. I had in the gym last week. He's a center. He's a big, tall center, 7'5" wingspan, the whole thing. And we did a lot of guard stuff this week just to get him moving better out offensively. Because I think if you can work on your escape dribbles offensively, it's kind of the same movement when you're defending in pick and roll in drop coverage. You're up and then you got to retreat quickly, just like an escape dribble. And it's just more fun to practice. Yeah. So I trick these guys into doing guard stuff offensively to help their agility on defense. So I had one player once said to me, a big 6'9", 4'3", 5'4", really. He said, I feel so much better guarding small forwards now that I've worked on my small forward game offensively. I can kind of think better as to how they're thinking. He's setting me up for the inside-out cross, or has he go, or whatever. And so I think those big wings for Boston are going to be a little more comfortable guarding Kyrie than almost any other typical power scoring wing duo in the league. Maybe better than any of them. That's not to say he won't solve the problem. Sometimes he will. But again, it goes back to the other side of the court. Dallas has to solve that Boston offense repeatedly, because I think Boston's going to score a lot.
Okay. We're having a great discussion, but we do have to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with more of David Thorpe's thoughts on the NBA Finals and more. In fact, I'm going to ask him about what in particular makes Jrue Holiday every NBA player's favorite or most ranked defender, because everyone says the same thing about him, and he's going to play a big role in this series. But in the meantime, you're listening to the Hello and Welcome podcast presented by Betway. Welcome back. It's Will and David. Okay, we're back to the NBA Finals preview here on Hello and Welcome. So, Jrue Holiday, this is somebody who Kevin Durant, lots and lots of players have identified Jrue Holiday. Paul George, I heard it on his podcast recently as well. They all identify him as the best defender in the NBA, at least on the perimeter. And of course, we see a lot of that talent.
I said it too. Yeah, last year. Yeah.
You mentioned you watched the Pacers series pretty closely. I think he had some pretty key defensive moments in crunch time of that series as well. As somebody who looks at all the details, and I'm sure teaches a lot of these details as well, what in particular is Jrue Holiday doing besides his physical gifts and everything like that? What is it about sort of the way he reads and the way that he approaches these matchups against stars that makes him so effective? And also, like, it literally gets into the heads of these great offensive players. Not that they won't attack him, but they all recognize that they are attacking what is probably the most difficult perimeter defender in the league.
I'll answer your question first with a question. In his best years in Toronto, did you really like Kyle Lowry on defense?
I think towards the end, he became a better help defender than on-ball defender.
What about when he was at his best?
At his very best defensively, I would say, yes, I really did like what he did defensively. Yeah.
So Kyle Lowry and Jrue Holiday have like super fast brains. You can call it high Wi-Fi processing speed or whatever it is, but they can just solve the equation so fast. We set screens in the NBA. We set screens in basketball to make defenders think. Mm-hmm. It's really why we're doing it. The end result might be getting guys open. Why are they getting open? Because we're making them think. Mm-hmm. And so because it doesn't always work when they think well, but we're trying to get them to think. That's why blur ball, the Pacers blur ball, is so hard to guard. Everything is so fast. Mm-hmm. The ball movement, the cutting, the screening, all of it's so fast, and defenses break down, including Boston plenty of times. It's hard. Lowry's got a super quick brain, so does Jrue. I was lucky enough, I coached Jrue in pre-draft. So that was like 45 years ago. I had 6 guys drafted. I had 15 prospects in my gym that summer. Most of them I knew weren't going to make it. I thought I had 9 guys that could make it. 6 got drafted. A few other guys made the NBA just as undraftable players. So pretty talented group. Jrue was one of them. I remember telling Larry Bird, he wanted to draft. I had a kid named DeJuan Blair out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And
no ACLs.
He was going to draft him. He told me he was going to draft him. And then they found he had no ACL and even knee, so he didn't draft him. But I was trying to get the Kings or the Pacers to draft Holiday in the lottery, because I thought, in fact, I told Sacramento, I want to say they were drafting maybe number 3 or 5, whatever. They got Tyreek Evans. I thought they should have traded down and got Jrue, because he's got everything. He's got his high level of class and dignity, very competitive, not a selfish bone in his body. You said forget about his physical tools, but you can't. He's got the body of a power forward, just not the size of a power forward. Yeah. I had him when he was 18 years old still. He wasn't even, I don't think he was even 19 yet after his freshman at UCLA. Quick feet, quick hands, unafraid to try to make a play. and wrap it all up with someone who buys into that role. Like he knows this is what makes he and Derek so special in different ways. If Jrue Holiday is the best defensive perimeter guard, at least he was. I don't know if he is this year. He was for a few years. Derek White's the best defensive guard in the NBA at the rim. And I don't just mean shot blocking. I mean field goal percentage. He's
really good in transition, I feel like.
Amazing.
It's never really a 2-on-1 with him when he's back. Yeah.
Right. He is those two guys are an unbelievably dynamic duo. Really, they are. And listen, Andrew Nembhard cooked him. So I'm not telling you Kyrie can't do the same. It won't be easy, and it comes at a cost. Let's watch Dallas late game execution. That's where Indiana lost their games. They just were exhausted. Tired players make mistakes. There's a reason why Tyrese Halliburton dribbled out of bounds twice at the end of games. You're tired.
Yeah.
You don't see that in first quarters too much. And Boston can wear you down. And then also they've got those kind of defenders that can do that to you. And when Tyrese dribbled the ball out of bounds and like 3 minutes to go in game one, or maybe less than that, and everyone was saying, oh, look at that defense by Holiday. It wasn't anything special. He was guarding him fine. Tyrese has seen that 8 million times before and not dribbled the ball out of bounds. It was the cumulative effect of what was going on that he just dribbled the ball out of bounds. Right. Yes, if you don't guard him, he probably wouldn't have done that, but it wasn't anything special. But they're always there. When you ask me about Jrue, he's just always present. He's always not always, but more than anyone else, he's just in the right place with the right demeanor, the right disposition, hands in the right place, footwork in the right spot, understanding the execution that's needed for the strategy that they're assigning to that particular action or play. He and Derek check those boxes, as well, if not better than everybody else. And I thought Jrue Holiday shot terribly in Game 6 against Phoenix, but played great. And of course, he made the famous lob to Giannis to kind of ice the game in that Game 6 against Phoenix. But he doesn't need to play great offense to really make an impact, and he gets that. It doesn't affect him. Whereas when Luka was going crazy against Minnesota, their everything failed. System failure. We can't guard this guy. He's going nuclear. Our system shut down. Game's over. Right. I don't think Jrue Holiday's not going to do that if Kyrie or Luka get off on him.
That's the emotional aspect I was trying to talk about with like when Kyrie starts to make shots, because then all of a sudden you're like, this looks impossible. This task, and it starts to sort of weigh in you mentally, I feel like. But with Boston, there is that improved maturity. And it's funny because like I was thinking about it. They brought in Jrue Holiday not necessarily by plan, right? Like they were going to go into this season and they had sort of what they had, and then he became available towards the end because of the trade with Milwaukee.
What a mistake by Milwaukee.
Yeah, first off, Milwaukee. I mean, I'm sure they regret a couple of the last few years, but like that in particular, Boston still made the bold move because when you look at it, like they gave up very reasonable prices for Derek White, who was on a team in San Antonio that wanted to tank, wanted to pivot. He was already on a really, really great contract. And Boston was just very smart to swoop in and see how he would fit into their system, and he's blossomed there. Kristaps, I mean, I think they actually got a first-round pick in the Kristaps deal, which they then used to put into the Jrue Holiday trade. Even the Al Horford trade, like they used one first, and they got Horford, who's been great for them for multiple years.
It sounds to me like you're suggesting Brad Stevens is running circles around the league, and I would agree with you. He
kind of is. Yeah, I feel like he's actually better as a GM than as a coach, and he was a really good coach too. But like with Jrue Holiday, they actually paid like what I would consider a fair price for Jrue Holiday. They gave up 2 rotation players who were injury prone and whatever, but like still quality rotation players, Robert Williams and Malcolm Brogdon, and they gave up 3 firsts, I believe, or at least 2 firsts in their deal for Jrue Holiday. But it was worth it. When you watch it, it's worth it. It's interesting because he replaced Marcus Smart, who had won the Defensive Player of the Year, which whatever. I mean, I don't know if he was the best defender, but
I thought he was.
Okay, well, I think with Marcus, like he's obviously very physically sound, and he's when he wants to be very technically sound, but there's a gambling aspect to it, also to his game.
So what?
But I think with Jrue, like he doesn't really gamble the same way, and he doesn't really, you know what I mean? He doesn't get like off on the gambling. You know how like certain defenders like to get off on the gambling, sparse off on the whole team, and it gives the whole team a boost. I think Jrue Holiday is just calm, cool, collected, makes the right play, and still is as effective, if not more effective, in creating stops.
He gambled when he tried to cut off Nembhard's right hand. And as I saw the play live, and I've watched 8 million of those plays.
Okay.
If they had called a foul, they wouldn't have won the reversal because he literally Nembhard ran into him and couldn't go anymore. I'm not saying the foul should have been called. That's a separate argument.
Whatever.
If they called it, there was contact there. Andrew couldn't keep going. That's why the ball was loose, and Andrew wasn't because he ran into Jrue's big body. So I don't mind gambling if that's the strategy. I think Boston needed Marcus to play the way he played. I think Jrue is playing the way Boston needs him to play. People love to trash gambling. I'm not saying you do. Yeah. And they're not looking at the bigger picture. Chris Paul leads the world in steals. You don't think any of those were gambles? Yeah, they were gambles, right?
Okay.
So Jrue, yes.
Jrue, it feels like he's reading. Or maybe but they're all reading that a little bit. But I would argue this way. I think this will make a lot of sense to what you're saying. Okay.
There's a defensive plan that I'm going to try to create chaos, or I'm going to try to just be a lockdown guy, or as a team. I'm going to create chaos as a team. Raptors fans should know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
The world's leaders in fouls, right? They foul everything. You can't call it always, back when they were playing that way. And they create a lot of chaos. Yeah, and if you didn't turn it over and they didn't call a foul, you might be in a little trouble when you were Raptors defensively. Yep. And then you have the lockdown guys that don't necessarily create chaos, but they just make it really hard. I'm a fan of both. I'm an absolute fan. When Brunson was absolutely incredible scoring over Nembhard, nobody was realizing the dude's taking 12 dribbles before every shot and dying. He's going to run out of gas. Nobody can keep this up. Go check out his game 6 and 7 before he broke his hand. It's hard to do. And Neesmith obviously helps some too because he's a little different than Andrew. I like those guys. Lock down, make it tough. I don't think you can be a chaos creator against Kyrie. He's just too skilled.
He doesn't panic. Yeah.
And he's too skilled. He's just too gifted. I think you can cause some chaos against Luka, to be honest with you. And so I think it's a mistake to just play vanilla against Luka. I think they've got to mix in some traps. I do.
Fair enough.
I don't know they will. I thought that's also Brunson being smaller, Kyrie being smaller, mixing some traps against Kyrie also. One-on-one gambling against him is it's not even gambling. It's just losing because he's just too skilled with the ball. But you got to give them different looks all the time. You can't be predictable. It's like playing poker. You can't give them a tell. You can't come out of a timeout and go to something you always go to. They'll have already scouted it. The math, the probability you're doing this and this will already be there. So this is where the coaches will come in a little bit. But you mentioned the emotional IQ like I have. I think that's where Joe's biggest strength has been as a coach. Is I don't love when he declares war in the media in interviews. I think that's weird. But I felt like Joe never, he never panicked. Where Mike Malone, I think, has panicked some the last 2 years. He obviously won a championship anyway last year.
Yeah, he's a
I don't see that with Joe. I don't see that with Joe. I don't know him. But he just seems, we're okay. Let's lock in. Let's make our corrections. Let's every game of that last couple of series, their defensive intensity tends to ratchet up in the second half. I think that's a sign of coaching. Like, we've got to do it. It's hard to do it for 48 minutes. Most teams don't do it. Yeah. And they found a way every game to just kind of guard guys harder, be tougher, more tough-minded. I think Joe's done a good job with that. And I don't think Jason Kidd's a great coach, but I don't think he panics either. I really liked his serene body language. He's got Luka and Kyrie on his team. He should be more relaxed, and I think he has been.
Okay, there is no way really to pivot from a discussion in NBA Finals towards the Raptors, but we have like 5 more minutes with you, and I just wanted to sneak in some Raptors content. If it's not good, honestly, producer, cut this, okay? Because the Raptors don't really belong in a discussion about the NBA Finals, but it is technically a Raptors-oriented show. So I have come up with 2 questions to add David Thorpe about the Raptors in a discussion of the Finals. Okay, so the first question is, which Raptors right now would make it into the rotation of either of these 2 NBA Finals teams between Dallas and Boston, and also what role would they be playing?
I mean, Scotty definitely helps both teams. I'm a huge Scotty Barnes fan. I think quickly would be a good card for them. And he would be Scotty's role would almost be, well, they're all going to be limited to some degree because they already have the primary scoring ball handling guys on both teams. But Scotty really, I mean, his defensive improvement, he'd be much better than Derrick Jones Jr. for Dallas, that's for sure.
Fair.
I think that quickly would just be a role player off the bench and, like a Peyton Pritchard type, right?
Okay.
He could really help Dallas off the bench, in my opinion, as a guard.
Yeah.
And then it's a question of, for RJ, which RJ are we getting? Because
we're getting Toronto RJ. We're getting 55% shooting from the field RJ. Yeah.
That guy was good. Yeah, it's funny how it's worked. A lot of players have done very well with Tom in New York based on where they were prior. Obi Toppin got better leaving, so did RJ. Now, it's short term. Obi had a season plus, but so this RJ, I mean, he's good enough to be a rotation player for both teams without question.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. I like that one. And then the other question I had for you, as somebody who, and we talked about it in our previous conversations on air, but you know Masai for a very long time. If Masai came to you this summer, and I'm sure you guys will cross paths, and maybe you guys already have already.
Vegas.
Vegas, right? He comes up to you and he's like, David, listen, my team won 25 games last year. We didn't have a top pick in this year's draft. Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here with my roster? And he asks you for 3 steps to get the Raptors back to, let's say, playoff contention in an Eastern Conference that, even though it doesn't have maybe like super high quality teams outside of Boston, but like, well, I don't even want to dismiss other teams, but there's a lot of really good teams in the East that the Raptors would have to jump to get to, let's say, a top 6 level. Masai comes to you and he's like, David, what do I do with my roster? What's your answer?
Man, it's pop quizzes. So I guess I got a couple.
Okay, all right.
Obviously, I'm in the player development business, so you got to get Grady Dick on the right track defensively. Get him to understand his role the way Ben Shepherd did for the Pacers. Grady probably has more talent. They play similarly. I think Grady plays hard.
He plays hard for sure.
I liked him. You got to get him up to speed defensively. It's going to take a while. Mm-hmm. And I think they need to find a different 5. I don't think anyone thinks he's the answer for what's going on there. They're about to pay quickly, I think. Is that right?
Yep.
Isn't he up for? So
yep.
Yeah, I like him. I don't love him. People have comparing. I mentioned Nembhard a few times on this podcast. I know you guys know he's Canadian, all of that. He's going to get paid by somebody. It's going to be Indiana, and he's an amazing partner to Tyrese. But a team like Toronto going after someone like that's got one more year on the $2 million, whatever, you'll rip up his 4th year, which is a team option.
Yeah,
I think he's going to be much better than Quickly, and so I wouldn't be so quick to pay Quickly without checking around to see what else we can do. Although I like him fine.
Yeah.
This RJ is exciting. So that's another thing I would talk about is NBA players are challenged when they fail and they're challenged when they succeed. You don't want them to lose their confidence when they fail, and they do all the time. And you don't want them to get complacent, casual, arrogant when they're succeeding. Mm-hmm. And I think RJ, to partner with Scotty, has got to recognize Scotty's probably a more talented player than me. I think he is.
Yeah.
I can be a very good Jaylen Brown type. That is a big reach for RJ, but he's young. We shouldn't be afraid of that. Yeah. But we got to make sure we challenge RJ to recognize what we did for a terrible team that wasn't trying to win is not the same thing as producing when we need you to win because we're trying to win games. And so let's stay humble. Let's stay focused. I think he's probably playing for Team Canada this summer, which could be a great thing.
Yeah, his dad's the GM. He has no choice.
Yeah, right. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. So that could be a real growth opportunity for them. Right. But the other thing, I say this all the time when I do Zach Lowe's podcast every few years on the MIP vote.
Yep.
The guys who I always pick are the ones that were great and became elite. Mm-hmm. And so Scotty Barnes is great. The hardest jump is to get to the elite level. It's super hard to do. And most guys don't do it. They kind of have a ceiling. they've got to really coach up Scotty on how do we get to all NBA level play, because that is a game changer. And he's the only guy on that roster that probably has that kind of upside. I don't think RJ does. They probably do. I don't think his quickness is the same. He's not as explosive as an athlete. He still can be a very good player, and even maybe an all-star. Like I don't think that's out of the possibility for him.
No.
I don't think. But Scotty can be an all NBA level player, MVP type of player. Giannis light, but there's, he shoots threes. Giannis doesn't. So how do you get that? And then I guess one last thing I would say is I didn't really watch the Raptors once they clearly became not relevant to the team, to the season. But I would visit with Darko on what we can do strategically based on the roster we have. How can we play differently? I don't even know what they did. But I'm sure there's a better way to play given the roster that they have. Let's play that way. And I would lean towards playing fast. I think Scotty is a quick decision maker. Quickly, he's very fast. I don't know about his decision making. That's something I've got to see more. But I just think it's the better way to play.
Okay. There you go. Well, I hope you come across Masai, and I hope he asks you the same question. Otherwise,
he will not.
Okay.
Not gonna happen.
Well, maybe I'll see Masai at the draft, and I'll tell him.
You can ask him.
Yeah, there you go. I'll ask him. I think that's a fair question as in a press conference. How do you get your team good again? That's like the number one question that a GM should have to answer. It ain't easy. Yeah, that's true. But okay, David, we appreciate you so much. Obviously, everyone go subscribe to TrueHoop. Everyone knows where to find you. But just seriously, I mean, the fact that I've had 3 iterations of this show, and you've always been willing to come on and join and discuss. This is a Sunday morning, people. This is a Sunday morning. And the two of us were talking about what makes Jrue Holiday great defensively. But you could hear the passion in his voice, and you'll hear the passion all the time in the TrueHoop podcast. Subscribe to the newsletter as well. You just learn a lot more. And of course, David is super plugged in as well. If you're just one of those people that are super interested in league insights and everything like that. But that's, I know you're not a newsbreaker and you're not trying to put out rumors, but there is also a lot of nice behind the scenes details that you get from reading and listening to your work. So I just want to say thank you once again, David. And that does it for us today. I've been your host, Will Lou. You've been listening to the Hello and Welcome podcast presented by Betway. Thanks to our guest, David Thorpe, our editor and lead producer, Jerome Chang, and everyone else helping behind the scenes. We'll talk to you later this week.